Hi, I'm going to show you how I spin on a supported spindle. So first things first, all of my spindles tend to have a bulb right here. This one isn't particularly neat because it's broken, so I've re-whittled the tip. You're not going to find that on any other supported spindle as far as I know. Supported spindles usually have a long, thin, tapered section at the top. I point that out because I'm making this video for someone specifically who has one of my spindles. So when you're winding the temporary cop on a normal supported spindle, it's just going to be somewhere near the tip over here. Whereas when you're winding it on one of my spindles, it's going to be in the indent between the bulb and the shaft. Just something to note. So let's get started. A couple things to note. One is I've got my spinning bowl here. As you can see, the base is quite a bit smaller than the top of it, so it wobbles like crazy, which is no good to spin in. You want your spinning bowl to be very stationary. So I keep mine in here a lot of the time, which, believe it or not, is better than nothing. Another thing you can do, other than find something to put it in, is to sort of nestle it in between blankets or like in a coat, anything that keeps it in place. That'll work. And then lastly, we've got the fibers. So these are just some Rolags. I believe the fiber is a BFL cross of some kind. It's of particular importance that when you're learning, you choose a fiber that's pretty fine. The reason for that is because you're going to be spinning quite fine. So if you start with a fiber where the individual fibers are all quite thick, you're just going to have a hard time drafting something thin enough to actually spin well. So starting with something like BFL or Merino or anything like that, Deboulé, Rambouillet, that's going to be better than starting with something thicker like Jacob or anything like that. So to start, I could start just by spinning straight from this Rolag, but I find that pre-drafting can go a long way, especially when I was learning. I really relied on pre-drafting, so I'm just going to pre-draft a small section just to get us started. I tend to go for something close to pencil roving, but basically just, when it's not under tension, about as big as one of your fingers is fine. Let's just snap it there. Adjust my camera, sorry. Alright. So, I put my yarn on the tool the same way, no matter if it's a drop spindle, a supported spindle, or my wheel, which is that I pre-draft a little bit further, and then I go back to the start and just make a small slip knot. And obviously this has no twist, but it doesn't need any twist. It'll stay where it is, and it's not going to be like under tension or strain long enough for it to matter that it has no twist. So now that we've got our slip knot on our spindle, or however you want to attach it, we're just going to wind it up the top. And so now I'm going to draft a little bit, and the way that I draft on supported spindle is probably a little bit different than standard. What I do is I hold the end that's attached to my spindle quite firmly. I pinch that, and then I pinch a couple inches apart the end that's attached to my fiber supply, and I pinch that very loosely, and then I just move my hands apart, and that's it. And whatever happens, but it typically behaves. So now that we've drafted that out, we're going to add twist. Now, the way that you add twist on a supported spindle is by flicking the tip. When I think of a flicking motion, I think of like that. That's not what I'm doing here. I don't think that would work. Maybe it would. What I do is something more like this. I'm sort of rolling it, you know, but quickly and usually pretty hard. So I'm going to demonstrate that now. And there we go. We got a little bit of twist. The only thing about this method of attaching the spindle is, or the fiber to the spindle, is that it snags on the tip when you start, but no matter. So we're going to add a bit more twist and just sort of walk it down the spindle until I think this whole section has a decent amount. Yeah, good enough. So you'll notice I'm winding down here at the moment, but now we're going to start winding our temporary cop, and that is going to be wound up here, or as close to the tip as you can comfortably manage. As I said, the reason I have these bulbs here is because otherwise it tends to just sort of, the temporary cop for me tends to sort of migrate up the tip as I work, and that gets annoying. Presumably, if that was a problem for everybody else, there would be onion domes on every spindle, so I don't think it's a big problem for most people. So when we wind, we keep the spindle in the bowl and let the weight of the spindle press down. You don't need to be pressing down with any force or anything like that. One thing I think is important with supported spindles is ergonomics, just trying to stay comfortable the whole time. Because you're usually spinning quite a fine yarn, and the slightest amount of discomfort can make you snap the yarn pretty easily, I've noticed, or at least it can with me. You might notice I'm testing the amount of twist I have each time by letting my fingers go closer together and then seeing how much twist I have. I think that's a good amount, and then I wind on. And then I just draft more. And again, I'm only pulling back. I'm not doing drafting in the traditional sense necessarily, or at least what I consider the traditional sense. And the spindle's sort of falling over because I have to kind of hunch over for my camera. It shouldn't typically. An important thing is the angle that you've got your fiber at when you're spinning it. So you don't ever really want it to be straight up, because it's all gonna do this. It's all gonna unwind from your spindle, and that's no good. So an angle like this is pretty good. That's fine. And then I lower the angle like this when I'm winding it onto the temporary cop. So you're always switching the angle that this hand is at. But that's the main movement that you do with supported spinning. So I could fit quite a lot more on this temporary cop, probably like about that much. But for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to transfer it down to the permanent cop now. So to do that, we snap the yarn, and then we make what's called a butterfly. There's a lot of different ways to make it. Some people will loop it like between their pinky and their thumb. What I do is I loop it like this around these 3 fingers. That's what's comfortable for me. You should just do what's comfortable for you. The main thing that's important is that you're making a figure 8 here. And the reason that's important is because you're crossing each yarn over another in succession. This is the same thing that you do with applying bracelet, by the way. This is what keeps the yarns in order. And with like a... I'm not a good enough weaver to remember the term for this, but this is what you do when you're warping too. It's all about, keeping the yarns intact and in order, and figure 8s keep yarns in order quite well. So when you reach the end of your temporary cop of the butterfly in your finger, you just wind it right back up. You start a new temporary cop, and you reattach. Reattaching on a supported spindle is pretty much the same as reattaching on anything else. You just overlap your fibers and add twist again. You'll probably notice I'm doing things in different orders or at different angles all the time. That's just how I work. It might work best for you to always work in the same order or at the same angle. Really what I'm trying to say is everybody's different. Everybody's hands are different, everybody's tool is slightly different, everybody's fiber is different. So you should always work in a way that suits you and your project, rather than suits what you were taught necessarily. So I hope that was a helpful little demonstration. I tried to include some stuff that I didn't see mentioned in other videos, which is why I left out a lot of stuff that I saw mentioned in every other video. Have fun spinning.